to be upset about that. And so what we as Democrats are trying to do is to bring people back to the logic of the complexities of the system, the fact that you have got to protect the interest of due process, not only for the accused, but for the rights of the victim to ensure that the system is working well. And so I have offered our own constitutional amendment to detain the most violent offenders, the people that commit murder, the people that try to kill police officers, the people that commit continuous human trafficking of children. We as Democrats support those positions. But if you just take that one approach around bail and you don't acknowledge that Republicans have been in charge of the state for 30 years, they have underfunded not only healthcare and education, but also our court system. And law enforcement and our courts are desperate for funds to get through the digital evidence that is now part of every day's trial. Houston Police Department needs help with the backlog on ballistics, DNA, and other evidence that you absolutely have to get to the court system. So if you don't address that issue, all you do is slow down the system even further. And then let's talk about the people that were caught up in the system as kids, youthful offenders that committed nonviolent offenses. The stain of a criminal conviction keeps them from getting a good job, keeps them from having an opportunity to thrive, and often it turns them back into the criminal justice system that we call that revolving door. We want to put a stop to that. So we have a number of provisions that help people that have a stain of youthful, non-violent offenses to remove that stain in such a way that they can get back to work. That's good for everybody. And so those three positions: detain the most violent, invest in the infrastructure of our courts and law enforcement to get things moving, and get people who are nonviolent offenders in the past back to work. That's what Democrats stand for. That will actually make you safe.
So, Representative, and by the way, I want to remind everybody, you Q&A for questions. This is your opportunity to get them answered. Obviously not if you're downloading it later, but this is for those attending. You can ask questions. In terms of your big priorities, I know women's health is something that is a big ass priority for everybody, but particularly given your work in that area. Tell us what's going on, what your hope is for this session, where you think you are, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we actually have a major piece of legislation that we are trying to get through, House Bill 44. Many of you may know that last session, we were able to pass House Bill 3058. It created an affirmative defense to try to help our medical doctors where there is an ectopic pregnancy or a ruptured membrane. As Democrats, we are doing absolutely everything that we can to restore women's health care. And right now we have an urgent crisis in our medical center. And so myself and Chairwoman Donna Howard are joint authors of House Bill 44. It is a provision that's being offered by Chairman Charlie Guerin in the House, and on the Senate side, it's SB 31 by Senator Hughes. We are going to see a bipartisan approach to give our medical community the tools they need to save women's lives. Bottom line, I am pro-choice. I stand with our advocates and our allies that are doing everything that they can to get past and to undo the god-awful abortion bans that Republicans have passed in the last couple of sessions. But right now, we don't have the votes. That comes down to the electorate voting in November and voting for people who are pro-choice. What I do have the votes for right now is to save our medical community. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean physicians that have women come into their hospitals or their patient care rooms. They see a pregnancy crisis that they know if they don't treat it will result in the death of the mother or significant impairment to a major bodily function. Our physicians know what to do. They have the modern medical technologies to do it and to save women's lives, but they are handcuffed by 4 extremist abortion bans in Texas that are currently keeping them from acting until the woman is at death's door. And what we know is we've seen a 56% increase in moms dying in Texas since these abortion bans. House Bill 44 will free those handcuffs on the physicians and the hospitals, give them the opportunity to act, and will save women's lives. And that is what we have to do right now.
One of the things I saw, there's some coverage, there was some pushback by some reproductive rights advocates about that bill. Can you kind of explain, because it sounded honestly a little inside baseball and I wasn't following it. Can you kind of give us some clarity on what the issue is and why it's not really a problem or is a problem?
Yeah, opponents worry that in addressing the law in the way that we are, that somehow we're giving credibility to the 1925 abortion ban. Democrats are not doing that. We do not want any of these bans. We have stood opposed to them, especially for the last couple of sessions where we've not only had the old ban that came back into effect or is in discussion because Roe versus Wade was taken down by Trump's appointees in the Dobbs opinion. The reality is that debate is one for the courts. And I cannot control what's going to happen in the courts in the future. I cannot control what Republicans and extremists are going to argue in the future. But what I can control is that passing House Bill 44 will absolutely save women's lives today in Texas. And let me tell you, this bill is about much more than just pregnancy complications. What we are seeing in Texas is we are the world's renowned medical center, but we are no longer recruiting the best talent in women's healthcare. We are recruiting the best talent that is only getting admitted to red states. Would you come to Texas to practice women's healthcare when you know that you're being threatened with life in prison if you try to act medically when you know it's the right thing to do?
I think that would be worse than having an interview here in August.
There's so much. There's so much, and you're right. And we can joke about the heat in August, and I get it.
This is no joke.
The heat from a Republican extremism on the medical community is too much, whether it's the abortion ban or what we're seeing with our LGBTQ community, and the fact that the Republican Party that liked to always claim that they were about less government and less regulation has officially inserted themselves in every physician that you go to see. And so the fundamental thing for us as Democrats is we've all gone to the hospital. We've all gone to the doctor. When we sit there and we sit in that patient waiting room and they come out and they call the name Ann Johnson, when I stand up to go back in the back, Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, and Ken Paxton effectively go with me. But Mike, as a straight white male, it's too crowded. And as a straight white male, when they call your name, you somehow get to go by yourself. And so this is really about, for all of us, advocating for the fact that taking back parents' rights to be able to provide care for their children, taking back women's rights to be able to make decisions about our reproductive health is about getting the Republican legislators out of our patient care room. I am completely on board with that. I am in for that fight, and I will be there next November 2026 advocating for the people running for office that will undo those bans. But right now, we don't have those numbers until the electorate stands up with us. But I do have the numbers to get this done. And what we are getting done here is returning medical professionals the ability to practice medicine in a pregnancy complication. This is about medical exceptions to pregnancy complications. This is not a choice bill. It's about protecting our doctors and our women in healthcare crisis. It is urgent, and it's not only urgent because, as I mentioned, we are not recruiting the best talent to come to Texas. Sorry, got a little excitement by my dogs. We are not just Capitol Confidential, but I'm back home for the weekend and got the dogs excited. If you don't recruit,
well, we're glad to. I mean, we got a question, by the way, that kind of shows that. So keep going.
All right. If we don't make this change and recruit the best talent, it affects women's healthcare across the board. In 10 years, who are you going to have to do a hysterectomy? In 10 years, what OB-GYN is going to be there for your mother, your daughter, your granddaughter? And the reality is the crisis to the medical community on Republican extremism has to be pulled back. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, and what I want to ask you about, but I want to ask Joseph as a kind of a question along those lines. And it talked where you started, hey, we need to bring people back to logic. And what he's basically saying is, look, the old saying is if you're explaining, you're losing. The emotional appeal, getting to it. Obviously, we want to be accurate. We want to be full, but it's a challenge if you're talking about logic and we've got these, Democratic judges, for example, on bond are letting criminals go free, which doesn't really appeal to logic. It's like, what's the feel on that one?
About our Democratic judges and the job that they're doing?
No. In other words, what Joseph's asking is, we've got some simplistic, really appeals to emotion. We're obviously talking logic, and I'm not suggesting we go back to logic, but how do we explain better how direct these things are in very direct language?
Yeah, Democrats actually have a plan to keep you safer and a stronger Texas when it comes to public safety. And that is you detain the most violent offenders. You actually fund the law enforcement and the courts that have been working at this issue that Republicans have failed to do for 30 years, and you get people back to work. And if you do that, you keep them out of the criminal justice system and you allow your criminal justice system to truly address the most violent individuals. And so Democrats, we absolutely have a solid, good plan that will keep you safe. And that's what gets me about the Republican argument. They keep every 2 years, they'll pass something and say, we did it, we did it, we did it. And then they immediately turn around and have to blame somebody else for their failures. The reality is Republicans have been in charge of this state for 30 years. And yet everything that we talk about, healthcare, education, the grid, the problems that we see fundamentally across the state, those are Republican issues, but somehow they're good at trying to target that it's Democrats. Democrats actually have solutions. Democrats actually have a plan that will work when you put it in practice. Republicans have trouble governing, but they do a great job of campaigning. And so, yes, we need our Democrats to have our back and say, look, not only are Democrats good on the issues, they're great at solving problems, just like we're doing here on 44. We're solving a problem. We're solving a problem that Democrats have been screaming about for 4 years. We were screaming about it before these extremist bans went in place and said, if you do this, women will die. They did it anyway. So am I proud that we as Democrats have now gotten the state of Texas to a point to say, you're right, we got to fix this because we've got to save women's lives. Democrats are saving women's lives. Democrats are coming up with solutions that actually get you back to work. Democrats are actually coming up with a solution that would get every child in the state educated. It is Republicans that are playing partisan games with the most important issues in your life. And it's time to make sure voters get it.
Well, and I think that's what Joseph was talking about, is how do we appeal? And I think something as direct and honest as Democrats are saving women's lives
That's right.
makes sense. One of the things you mentioned before, obviously the medical community is under attack. Traditionally doctors have kind of stayed out of politics for the most part. I'm not saying all doctors. Do you think, and obviously, a big part of your district has medical professionals. Do you think that are they feeling the heat now? Do you think they're going to get more engaged now? What's your feel, what's your hearing at this point about medical professionals? Do they feel the heat like they ought to be?
They absolutely feel the heat. I mean, they feel the tension of the fact that Republican extremism has now entered the hospitals and physicians' care. Much of the legislation that we're seeing around our hospital community, the demonization of science and vaccines, the fact that we're seeing an outbreak in West Texas and Gaines County on measles because um, extremist Republicans are promoting this rhetoric that has nothing to do with foundations of science or healthcare. And so, as a representative of the Texas Medical Center, I am grateful that we truly have the best care in the world here. If you unfortunately are ever a patient in MD Anderson and you go sit in that waiting room, when you look around you and you start asking people where they're from, you'll hear from everywhere around the world. But we have to fight to maintain that number one position in healthcare. And that means you've got to get extremist Republican politics out of that point. Now, physicians are risk adverse. They don't like risk. And so when you tell them, hey, if you practice medicine in this state, you risk going to prison, boy, they can pack up and go to another state. And that's what we're trying to stop. We need people staying here. As far as, and I think this is a bigger issue, it's not really about, just the medical community, but I have a friend that before the election, when a lot of us are saying, hey, this is so critical, you need to get engaged. And they'll say, well, I'm kind of apolitical, right?
That's
Like,
honestly what I was asking about is a
yeah.
lot of doctors are in that position. Hey, politics ain't my thing. Are you seeing a sea change there or not?
I think we're seeing it with everybody. And for example, with this individual that's not in the medical community, but would always say to me, hey, I'm kind of apolitical. And then after January and after what we're seeing with Elon Musk just dismantling our government around NIH, our grants, our CDC, everything else, and all of a sudden their husband's losing their job. And you're not so apolitical now. And so I think this is the hard part. People are really suffering. People are really seeing the devastating impact of having a man like Elon Musk at the helm of the federal government, absolutely doing everything they can to dismantle the institutions. That we're going to feel that in Texas. I mean, for example, they're stripping out what CDC can do. And so now in Gaines County, it's going to cost us like $2.5 million in local tax money, Texas taxpayers, to try to deal with this measles outbreak.
You don't think cod oil will solve it all?
The more they
That was what our
dismantle,
secretary was talking about, cod oil. Just give more cod oil.
and that is the other challenge that we're seeing, which is while people are demonizing actual scientists and medical professionals, you have this group of grifters that are going out on social media and pushing supplements. I mean, it is truly today's snake oil, but it's being supported by the federal government through RFK Jr. And so you are now seeing people continue to be taken advantage of, because if you just buy this bottle of pills, you don't need to worry about really seeing your physician. It is dangerous. It is dangerous. And never before have we had this coming from the highest offices in the land, where we should have truth and integrity in protecting our people against a crisis. We are just demonizing actual scientists and lifting up social media grifters so that they can make a buck. It is time for people to get engaged in this game. When people say, I can't pay attention to politics, it's just too much to take, it's getting to the point of being too late, folks. Everybody is feeling the pain. And that's the thing about us as Democrats. We don't want people to die or suffer for politics. We step in, we try to do the right thing. And right now, at a time where you're seeing the dismantling of our government, our institutions around the nation, it is really, really time for people to recognize Democrats are here for everybody. We're here for upholding the institutions. We get it. When your house is on fire, your fire department needs to be able to show up. When something happens at an ATM, you need law enforcement to show up. When you get to the courts, you need the constitutional protections of due process to apply to everybody in that process and do it the right way. But that means that you have to actually have faith, trust in the institutions, and you have to support them in the way that respects the morals of this nation and the constitutionality across the board.
Well, Joseph had another one, but it's really about JFK or RFK rather, on dealing with it. What do you think? I mean, as a big picture, because obviously we're halfway, a little more than halfway. What is it that you feel most optimistic about? And I'll probably actually, let's do it this way. What are you most concerned about? And then I want you to finish our 30 minutes and a little less with what you're most optimistic about this session.
What I'm most concerned about is what we're seeing with vouchers. We're really seeing the governor. He went to at extraordinary lengths, and even as his Dave Carney. If you most of you, if you're on this call, you're in the weeds anyway. So you probably saw in the interim where even Abbott's advisor Dave Carney said Abbott crossed a line of gubernatorial decorum that we will never get back. He took $10.25 million from a voucher advocate out of Pennsylvania, ran a campaign against rural Republicans that had stood with Democrats to promote and keep public education in good standing, and lied about them, demonized them on the border rhetoric. Even though they had all voted with the governor 100% of the time, he said he couldn't trust him on the border. He didn't run on vouchers, because if he'd actually run on vouchers, he would have lost. But what he did is he replaced those rural Republicans that were looking out for their kids and their school districts with people that they think they can control. And what I think is going to be interesting as we get into this voucher debate, do those elected officials now hold true to the values of their constituents and what's best for their school districts? Or do they go with the people that got them elected?
That sounds like, are they going to stay bought or not?
And so we'll see what happens. We're going to be up for this fight on vouchers as Democrats. We continue to uphold the values of the fact that every child deserves a quality education. And if you're taking away from the kids that need it most and giving it to people that are already in private school and do not need $10,000, all you're going to do is be siphoning off from the kids that need it the most, taking from those that don't have and giving it to the avs that already have it. This is nothing more than welfare for the wealthy. And so that's our biggest fight that we have coming up.
What are you most optimistic about?
Yeah, I'm really optimistic about House Bill 44. I mean, I can tell you that Democrats have been fighting this between Chairwoman Donna Howard, myself, and many others to get us to a position that we could have Republicans go, okay, we got to get this back. We got to fix this. They are in the majority, which means we are working with them to get this done. But it is about restoring medical practice for our doctors, not only just in Houston, but across this state. And we want women to know, do not be afraid. If you are in a pregnancy complication and you have a crisis, go to your physician, go to your hospital. We are going to free the handcuffs from them that they can actually protect you, protect your interests, save your life. We're talking about this bill. This bill would absolutely have prevented Amanda Zawadzki, Kate Cox, and many of the other women from suffering the harms that they suffered. It is a bill that gives back the discretion to physicians to practice medicine, to use reasonable medical judgment. And ultimately, it is Democrats that have been working for years to save women's lives. It's an extraordinary thing that is happening here in Texas. It is because of your Texas House Democrats and your Senate Democrats that we are in this position to get the state to finally save women's lives. So I'm proud of our effort. We're not done. The fight for choice continues. It goes on. But let's take what we can right now. It's absolutely necessary to get through this urgent medical crisis.
And y'all have had one hearing. Are y'all expecting more? Like, is there going to be a Senate hearing at some point that we could watch and follow through?
We've actually, on this particular provision, on House Bill 44, the Senate on Thursday heard Senate Bill 31, which is the companion to House Bill 44. Just like that normal legislative process, it will be heard in the House. It's been sent to the Public Health Committee, and you have a number of Harris County Democrats on that committee. Myself, Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons, Representative Jolanda Jones. And so I think, again, you'll see us talking about the fact that we are pushing to save women's lives, and we need to get this done. This is urgent. It's got to happen now. For every one of your daughters, every one of your granddaughters, so many of them know the moment you get a pregnancy, you find out that you're pregnant. It should be an incredible moment that you're excited about in your family. Right now, every woman kind of holds their breath a minute to make sure they're going to get through it okay in this state. And we can take away that harm. We can take away that fear. And we can give back medical professionals the ability to say, no matter what happens in this pregnancy, if at some point this pregnancy becomes a risk to your life or any major bodily function, that we have the opportunity now to take care of the mother. This is the Life of the Mother Act, and we need to get it done.
Well, that's a great thing to be optimistic about. That's great hard work. Very much appreciate it. And also taking the time on Saturday when you're in session to be down here. Hopefully we'll get you back once it's passed and have an opportunity to talk about how you did it. So thank you so
Mike.
much for all you're doing.
Really appreciate y'all.
Thank y'all.
Bye-bye. Nobody seems to be upset about that. And so what we as Democrats are trying to do is to bring people back to the logic of the complexities of the system, the fact that you have got to protect the interest of due process, not only for the accused, but for the rights of the victim, to ensure that the system is working well. And so I have offered our own constitutional amendment to detain the most violent offenders, the people that commit murder, the people that try to kill police officers, the people that commit continuous human trafficking of children. We as Democrats support those positions, but if you just take that one approach around bail and you don't acknowledge that Republicans have been in charge of the state for 30 years, they have underfunded not only healthcare and education, but also our court system, and law enforcement and our courts are desperate for funds to get through the digital evidence that is now part of every day's trial. Houston Police Department needs help with the backlog on ballistics, DNA, and other evidence that you absolutely have to get to the court system. So if you don't address that issue, all you do is slow down the system even further. And then let's talk about the people that were caught up in the system as kids, youthful offenders that committed nonviolent offenses. The stain of a criminal conviction keeps them from getting a good job, keeps them from having an opportunity to thrive, and often it turns them back into the criminal justice system that we call that revolving door. We want to put a stop to that. So we have a number of provisions that help people that have a stain of youthful, non-violent offenses to remove that stain in such a way that they can get back to work. That's good for everybody. And so those three positions: detain the most violent, invest in the infrastructure of our courts and law enforcement to get things moving, and get people who are nonviolent offenders in the past back to work. That's what Democrats stand for. That will actually make you safe.
So Representative, and by the way, I want to remind everybody, you Q&A for questions. This is your opportunity to get them answered. Obviously not if you're downloading it later, but this is for those attending. You can ask questions. In terms of your big priorities, I know women's health is something that is a big ass priority for everybody, but particularly given your work in that area. Tell us what's going on, what your hope is for this session, where you think you are, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we actually have a major piece of legislation that we are trying to get through, House Bill 44. Many of you may know that last session, we were able to pass House Bill 3058. It created an affirmative defense to try to help our medical doctors where there is an ectopic pregnancy or a ruptured membrane. As Democrats, we are doing absolutely everything that we can to restore women's health care. And right now we have an urgent crisis in our medical center. And so myself and Chairwoman Donna Howard are joint authors of House Bill 44. It is a provision that's being offered by Chairman Charlie Guerin in the House. And on the Senate side, it's SB 31 by Senator Hughes. We are going to see a bipartisan approach to give our medical community the tools they need to save women's lives. Bottom line, I am pro-choice. I stand with our advocates and our allies that are doing everything that they can to get past and to undo the god-awful abortion bans that Republicans have passed in the last couple of sessions. But right now, we don't have the votes. That comes down to the electorate voting in November and voting for people who are pro-choice. What I do have the votes for right now is to save our medical community. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean physicians that have women come into their hospitals or their patient care rooms. They see a pregnancy crisis that they know if they don't treat it will result in the death of the mother or significant impairment to a major body.